What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons every single day. I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2. I talk all things Detroit sports. So come on over, say hello, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from you guys. Also, we're just 2 weeks into the channel and already sitting at over 1,000 subscribers. So once again, thank you guys all so much for tuning in every single day. The support on the channel has been unbelievable so far. And with that being said, let's dive right into today's video. So the first thing I want to talk about is Udonis Haslem had some words about his former teammate Duncan Robinson. We'll talk about that. And then I just want to talk about an underrated skill that I think Duncan Robinson will bring to the table. And then we'll just dive into former Michigan coach John Beline had some words about Caris LeVert and Duncan Robinson that we will talk about. And then before we wrap things up, I just want to go over whether or not I think the Pistons are done adding in free agency. And if they're not, who are some people that could be options going forward. The first things first, let's talk about Udonis Haslem and the comments that he had about Duncan Robinson. So obviously Udonis Haslem, 20-year vet, played in Miami all 20 years. He's on ESPN now, and just obviously one of the premier veteran presences in the NBA history. He made a living off of just being a high basketball IQ, being a good teammate, encouraging players, just doing what they asked him to do, doing what Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley needed him to do for the team to be successful. So when somebody like Udonis Haslem gives you praise, that means a lot, and especially for a guy like Duncan Robinson, who also really just excels in what he knows what to do. He excels in what they ask him to do, and Udonis Haslem is just a good veteran presence for a guy like Duncan Robinson. So I'm not surprised that they got along well in Miami. But Udonis had this to say about Duncan. He said, I'm happy for Duncan. He's a guy who's ignitable, but the thing he's going to do for them mostly is open up Cade Cunningham and the other guys. The way defenses react when Duncan steps on the basketball court, they face guard him, and they don't help side defend. So basically, Udonis Haslem is just saying what I was talking about yesterday, how when Duncan Robinson's on the floor, defenses just have to be very keyed in on where he is. They can't play as much help side defense because he poses such a threat as a spot up shooter. He's being face guarded at times. Teams double team him off of dribble handoffs to kind of deter his shot making ability. So there's a lot of things to like about Duncan Robinson, and Udonis Haslem has witnessed it firsthand. And he's also witnessed guys like Ray Allen, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, some of the more elite scorers in this league, and some of the more elite shooters in this league, like I mentioned, Ray Allen. So he understands what it looks like to be a very successful floor spacing wing, and he's going out of his way to bring up the fact that, like I said, he makes it very, very hard on defenses when he steps on the floor. And that's going to benefit Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson and Caris LeVert, who are guys that like to get downhill, like to have options in the corners for kickouts, because they do sometimes get a little bit out of control. But it is going to be really, really fun to watch a bunch of slashers, a bunch of playmakers who can also find corner shooters, and that offense is just going to mesh really well together. I think one more shooter would be nice to add to the mix, maybe like a Sam Hauser, and I'll talk about that later on, but we'll see how that kind of plays out. But it would be nice to have another shooter in the corner, because that would be a deadly duo. Sam Hauser and Duncan Robinson, two of the best spot-up shooters in the game. I would love to see that. But the last thing I just want to touch on regarding Udonis Haslem's comments is Malik Beasley last year had a career year, and I think a lot of that obviously had to do with the ability that Cade Cunningham has as a facilitator, the attention that he draws as a scorer. He is so good at getting his teammates open looks, and Malik Beasley benefited from that. So I don't see a reason why Duncan Robinson can't benefit from that. You also bring back another slashing, downhill, driving guard like Jaden Ivey, who is still working on kind of finishing at the rim, but he did show some promise as a guy who can drive and kick and drive and facilitate. So I see Duncan Robinson being kind of stepping into that Malik Beasley role and really finding success early on. But moving on to the next topic, I just want to talk about a skill that I actually really like with Duncan Robinson that I don't think Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley had, and that is just his overall passing, his playmaking, his ball handling, his facilitating, everything that you don't really expect a three-point specialist to do. I want you guys to go on Twitter right now or go on YouTube and just look up Duncan Robinson 24-25 playmaking highlights. There's about a 10-minute video of just him kind of showcasing some of the stuff he can do. And a lot of the plays he was making, we never saw Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley make whatsoever last year. He was making tough cross-court passes. He can throw lobs and that's really helpful with Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. We saw last year with Bam Adebayo, he and Kyle Ware, two rim running centers, benefited from playing with Duncan Robinson because of how hard teams are hedging on him, and they're double teaming him on those catch and shoot opportunities because, like I said, if he has space, he can get off a shot. So there's a lot of times where he's getting blitzed off of these dribble handoffs, off of these screens, and he stays comfortable, he stays composed. He can either do a little drop-off pass to Bam Adebayo, find an opening with a dribble to the right or to the left. He can also dribble a little bit around the key, wait for the offense to kind of set itself up, throw a lob, find a guy open in the corner, dump it down to Bam Adebayo. There's just a lot of versatility that he brings as a playmaker offensively. And like we talked about, with the attention that he draws as a shooter, they don't really realize that he can still burn you off the drive and kick, or driving and dumping it off and making a good read off of a show from a defender when he's driving into the paint. So there's just a lot of areas to like about Duncan Robinson's game where we can see it. You go watch that video, you can see that this isn't just something that he developed overnight. He's been working to get better and better and better. And he's been working to find ways where he can be on the court and benefit Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero and Jimmy Butler when he was on the Heat, because Duncan was never going to be their number one guy, but he was going to do things on the court that can allow those other guys to flourish. And also, he was going to score and offer you just what they wanted his role to be. You know, he's going to excel in what he's asked to do. And with the playmaking, that's just a plus because, like I said, we didn't really see that with Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley last year. They were just more spot-up shooters and relied on for their scoring. But if you can have a guy like Duncan Robinson, and there's a two-man game with Jalen Duren where when Jalen Duren, let's say he flips it off to Duncan Robinson at the top of the key, and two defenders come out on Duncan, he can stop, pump fake, take a dribble to the right, do a bounce pass to Jalen Duren, who then has more flexibility with two guys out on Duncan. There's less people in the paint. There's a higher probability that there's a smaller defender in front of him. So then he has more flexibility in what he can do, and he can operate from that free throw line extended, maybe take a jump shot if he develops that part of his game, or drive downhill or pass. He showed the ability to be a pretty solid passer as a big man last year. So I just genuinely think that there's a lot of areas in Jalen Duren's game that having a good passing wing and three-point shooting wing like Duncan Robinson can help untap. I mean, we saw what Eric Spoelstra did. We mentioned it with Kyle Ware and Bam Adebayo. There's a lot of things that I think JB can try and replicate. As I've talked about before, Jalen Duren and Bam Adebayo kind of play similarly. Out of college, Bam Adebayo was pretty raw, so is Jalen Duren. So I think adding Duncan Robinson can kind of be similar to what they did in Miami, and I just hope JB is able to tap into those pick and rolls and those dribble handoffs that we saw so often with the Heat. But let's just move on to, we'll talk about Duncan Robinson and Caris LeVert here. I know I've talked about Duncan a ton, but I'm just honestly trying to convince myself that it was a good signing overall. But we'll talk about John Beline. Obviously, he's still in the Pistons organization right now. And he's a senior advisor for player development. Let me backtrack. I will say, I'm convincing myself that Duncan Robinson's a good signing, but at the end of the day, I actually do think he's going to benefit this team, and he's going to benefit from being on the team. So, but I don't want to be too harsh on him, but obviously there's stuff that he has to work on. But John Beline was able to kind of break it down for us, similarly to how Udonis Haslem did. He said, for the defense, it's read and react. And if you lose him for a second, it's over, Beline said. I mean, 40% from three at high volume for all this time. Those are really good stats. They had to replace that with Malik Beasley, and I think that they've done a good job of doing that. And obviously, like I mentioned, Beline is around the Pistons organization. So, he knows what Trajan is building. He knows that he's trying to build a team. He also stated, just a heads up, Tony Garcia of the Detroit Free Press actually put this article out talking about John Beline. So I just wanted to give Tony Garcia his credit. He does a great job over at the Free. But he writes, where is it? Sorry. Beline is aware there's a chance he's a bit biased, but was asked to put his heart to the side and put his NBA coach and front office hat on. Did these acquisitions truly help the Pistons get better? And he said, absolutely. It looks to me like Trajan is building a team. You don't amass talent, you build a team. They need shooting, there's Duncan. They need one more guy to complement Cade in the backcourt, there's Caris. There are just more pieces in this thing. When you have Cade, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren already there, you're just filling in pieces. whether they're starters, coming off the bench, whatever. They'll play the role and make everybody else better. So clearly, he is going to go to bat for his guys. He was their coach in college. But he does truly understand, like we talked about, Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, they're not meant to come in and start taking 15 shots a night. No, they're coming in to just make this team better, complement the young core, allow the young core to grow, and maybe you find different things here and there, like I talked about with Duncan Robinson's playmaking, where, oh man, Jalen Duren's really benefiting from that. Asar Thompson's really benefiting from having another floor spacer like Duncan on the floor. So only time will tell, but I trust John Beline. He did a great job developing Michigan's program. He's done a great job in the Pistons front office, and he has a high basketball IQ, great basketball mind. And at the end of the day, like he mentioned, we still have Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, Ron Holland that are all homegrown and are still learning their roles in the NBA. So adding veteran pieces is not the end of the world. It's only going to help this team get better, like we saw last year with some different additions. And they moved on from a couple of guys, but you got good return back in Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson. And I think both those guys are going to help the team in the long run. But before we wrap it up, let's just dive into one more topic. I know I dove way into Duncan Robinson there, and if you guys don't like him, I apologize. But hopefully some of the things I said reassured you a little bit more that he could potentially be a pretty valuable signing. But let's just talk about where there's some kind of holes in the depth chart. A spot that I've heard a lot about is the backup point guard with Marcus Sasser. It's a little bit difficult to kind of see where he fits in the rotation. I mentioned it yesterday with Karis LeVert being a bigger guard. You could play Marcus Sasser and Karis together, but I just really don't know what the front office values Sasser at yet, if they want to hold him off another year or if they think they can put him in the lineup. If they do hold him back another year, it's kind of like at this point, what's the point? Like, what are we doing with him? Why don't we just trade him? So I would like to see Sasser get significant minutes, but if you're a little bit nervous about that, then maybe you could go out, and two names that I've heard and two names that I wouldn't mind that'd be kind of cheap and are veteran would be Malcolm Brogdon, who he's been all over the league, but he could be a guy that could give you good ball handling minutes off the bench. He's smaller than Karis LeVert, so he couldn't really play that two guard very well, but he could play the backup point guard. I don't think he could play at the same time as Marcus Sasser, so he would limit Sasser's ability to get rotational minutes. But another guy that I think maybe could play with Marcus Sasser would be Gary Payton II. He's an absolute lockdown defender, not really a great offensive player, but right now we do need good defensive guards. So I think that Gary Payton could be a guy you try and go after. I don't really love what he brings offensively, but I do like what he brings defensively. And then it's vice versa with Malcolm Brogdon. He's not a great defender, but he's pretty solid offensively still at around 30 years old. So we'll see. I'm just speculating at this point. I think either player could work out, but at the right price, right? You don't want to go throughout a multi-year deal to one of these guys, because then you're really limited with what you can do with Marcus Sasser. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, just suggestions. The front office could very well be done adding backcourt depth and plan on just riding with Sasser. But let me know in the comments or over on Twitter if you like the idea of adding a veteran backup point guard, or if you'd like to see Marcus Sasser step into that role. I think I'd like to see Marcus Sasser step into that role. I think that'd be really fun. He's another homegrown guy. He's still kind of young on the younger side, and I think there's a lot of upside offensively for him. So we'll see how that plays out. But just before we wrap things up, the last kind of position of need is a backup power forward. Some names I've heard are Bol Bol, which I don't even want to talk about Bol Bol because I've heard his name so many times around the Pistons community and it has never happened. So I'm just not even going to talk about that. But three names that actually could happen are Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher, and Trey Lyles. Trey Lyles would be a reuniting with the Pistons after he was on the team a couple years ago. But I think Precious Achiuwa, is not being re-signed by the Knicks, so he could be a guy that brings in good defense. Doesn't really give you a ton of minutes, but can rebound if you need it. If you're playing a team like the Cavs, who have two big men in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, it might be nice to have another guy that can come in for Tobias Harris and give you good rebounding minutes, just give you size overall. He's not really going to stretch the floor. Like the Pistons kind of alluded to wanting to try out a floor spacing forward or center. If you wanted to try that out, then maybe Trey Lyles, Chris Boucher could be options there. Both can space the floor decently well, not great efficiency-wise. 34% career shooters in their career from three-point range. So that could be options here and there if you don't want to play Tobias Harris 38 minutes a night, or you don't want to have to run a backup forward or a backup power forward in Isaiah Stewart or Ron Holland, who aren't really their comfortable positions. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what direction, but maybe Trey Lyles, maybe Chris Boucher, just some more rebounding on the floor would be nice if you're, taking out Jalen Duren and Tobias Harris and you're trying to run a rotation of Ron Holland and Isaiah Stewart in the front court. That's a 6'7" guy and a 6'9" guy. You might want to try and pair Isaiah Stewart with somebody a little bigger. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. Again, just speculation. But let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see a backup power forward addition and if any of the names I mentioned make sense in your opinion. Also, let me know if you don't want to see any of those names. I know they're pretty underwhelming. Trey Lyles and Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa aren't great names, but they are options nonetheless. So let me know you guys' thoughts. And that's really all I've got for you guys today. Let me know in the comments or over on Twitter your thoughts on the comments regarding Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert. Also, let me know if Duncan's playmaking ability gives you more hope in this signing. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter over at Kyle Garrison 2. Once again, thank you all so much for 1,000 subscribers. The channel is growing at an unbelievable rate, and it's all thanks to you guys. And with that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 15 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.